Hello, welcome to Gardeners World. Now, we've had a pretty cold and wet summer here at Longmeadow, so far at least, but not everything has minded that. The hostas have grown as big and as bouncy as ever. And I love the flowers, and particularly the fragrance. You don't really think of hostas as being scented, but a lot of them are, and very beautifully too. Now, it's the time of year when quite a few of us are trying to find some sun and go away on a holiday. And you can guarantee that the day you leave, the garden will be looking perfect and the weather will be a joy, and there'll be reports from wherever you're going to of the worst weather for 100 years. But it is worth, before leaving, trying to set the garden up so that if it's exceptionally wet and windy or if it's exceptionally dry, when you come back, it won't either be a jungle or a desert. So today I'll be looking at a few tips to apply before you go to keep the garden ticking over in your absence. It's been 25 years since the lost gardens of Halligan were reclaimed from history, and Carol has been down to see how the gardens are doing and also to see what their plans are for the next quarter of a century.
Some gardens that have undergone restoration can feel like museums, petrified in time. But at Halligan, you get exactly the opposite impression.
And as part of our quest to find Britain's most extraordinary allotments, Joe visits a plot in South Wales, where size turns out to be everything.
That is an absolute stunner, isn't it?
I've often mentioned the importance of deadheading to keep flowers being produced and not letting the ones that have faded go to seed, because when that happens, the plant diverts its attention from making new flowers into making seed. However, if you're going away, you need to go a step further, I think, and pick a whole good bunch of flowers. This dahlia is Rothsay Reveller, and you can either just enjoy them for a day or so before you go away, or give them to somebody. What it's doing is it's cutting the plant back. It's going to take a week or so to generate new buds, but that's fine, because when you come back, it means there'll be a decent display and the plant will be more compact. It will extend the flowering season, so everybody benefits. Now, let's pop those in there. This is a pink cactus dahlia, and I love the shocking pink of this. It always makes me feel like those fantastic 1950 hats in lurid colours and fantastical shapes. And they're a joy. Now, obviously, this is just to garner up some flowers so somebody else can enjoy them while you're away. But it's not really a problem. You're just trying to prolong the flowering season. However, if you've got precious plants in pots, if they dry out too much and you're away, say, for a couple of weeks, that can be a problem. Right, that gives those a bit of a drink before I take them indoors. Now, talking of having a bit of a drink, if you've got pots, particularly large pots, on a patio or a terrace, and they are full grown and in full flower, they'll be thirsty. And if, as chance has it, it is very hot and dry while you're away, then they will lose a lot of water very quickly, and a fortnight can be enough to kill some plants. So it's important you take what action you can to mitigate against that. Now, the first thing to do is to group as many pots together as you can. Now, obviously, for effect, you space them out. You want them to look good. But if you get the pots and just bunch them like that, it's going to do a number of things. It will create a little microclimate, because the ones on the inside will evaporate and lose moisture much more slowly. And then because you've got lots of foliage within this area, the moisture will evaporate and reach other foliage in other plants. So that's action number one. Group your pots together as far as possible, and if you can move them into the shade, so much the better. Anybody who grows houseplants will be familiar with growing plants in a saucer, or you can buy a terracotta tray to put things in. Really good if you're away. The important thing is they're shallow. Don't be tempted to put a plant in a bucket because it will just get waterlogged. You just want to have a little bit of water at the base so the plant can draw upon it as it needs it. If you've got plants on a table or raised up like this, perhaps on a wall, they're going to be much more exposed to wind. So take them off and put them down on the ground, because wind will dry things just as effectively as hot sun. I shall pop these underneath them so that they can sit in water, and that will be fine. There is another method of supplying a plant with a constant supply of moisture while you're away. I confess I haven't used it, but I've been told about it, and I thought I'd give it a go. Now, the principle of this method is very simple. You have a container of water, a bucket is handy. You have a plant, this eucomis, that likes to have plenty of water, and you have a length of fabric which acts as a wick between the two. So bury one end in the soil, and it is important to bury it rather than just place it on there, and then put this in the water. The theory being is that this will become saturated and flow down, and as it dries out, it'll draw more water down. I'm told it works very well. We'll see. Now, when I was a child, I remember a couple of times going on a holiday in Cornwall to a place called Mevergissey. Now, nearby are the lost gardens of Heligan. And when I was a child, they were still very lost indeed. But 25 years ago, restoration began, and of course, it's become a very famous story. And Carol has been down there to visit them, to see what the gardens are like 25 years on, and also what their plans are for the next quarter of a century.
There are few ideas more tantalising than that of a secret garden that's been lost to nature for decades. In 1990, a hurricane ripped through the heart of Cornwall. But amid the devastation, the storm unearthed the bones of a dilapidated garden, revealing rare and exotic species from all over the world. Can you imagine pushing your way through the undergrowth, through briars and brambles, and suddenly realising that it's not just a wilderness, that in actual fact it's an enchanted garden? 25 years later, after painstaking and loving restoration, the garden has been restored to its former Victorian splendour. Heligan became derelict during the First World War, and it would be another 70 years before Tim Smith stumbled upon the remains of a walled garden, glass houses, and a gorge filled with spectacular tree ferns, all smothered in the undergrowth. Tim told me about the day he first discovered the garden.
In truth, it was like love at first sight. Everything that both moves you and me about things like the secret garden was here that day. You know, the peeling green paint on the door of the walled garden, or the rusty hinges just slightly ajar. And I doubt there's anybody that wouldn't just say, I've got to open that door. I remember in the building behind us, which was completely gutted, and the glass was hanging in ivy and bramble, but the wood had long ago rotted out. And I remember seeing an old pair of vine scissors on a nail hanging out of the crack in plaster, and just getting this tremendous sense of, a bit like the Marie Celeste, as if someone had said tea and everybody had gone fully expecting to return, but they didn't, and it felt terribly romantic.
Heligan's 200 acres have been meticulously revitalised. The large vegetable garden abounds with produce. There are flower gardens to inspire the most avid plant enthusiast, and a jungle built to rekindle the inner child in all of us. This is the Italian garden. It was one of the first pieces that they put back together when they started to renovate Heligan. Although the template of the whole structure follows the original to the letter, the planting is entirely modern. there are crocosmias, there's masses of verbena and fennel, and some of the most beautiful plant combinations. Anthemis tinctoria, just thrusting these big golden stars up through a bronze-leaved geranium with a little bit of soft grey stachys at the side. Heligan moves on. However much the team at Heligan acknowledge the history of the garden, their planting is completely up to date. These plants are so typical of the things that love this kind of environment. This great big Rhomnea coulteri, a tree poppy with grey glaucous foliage, but these tissue paper flowers. And then the arching stems of this diorama. And of course, queen of the bunch, the agapanthus, in pale blues, deep blues, but all with these big sprays of bursting flowers. But what about the future? What are the next 25 years going to be?
I want us to be the best productive garden in the world, the best vegetables, the best soft fruits. I want us to have the most fantastic herb and spice garden, interested in medicinal plants, delivering the skills for young people that are now relevant. I'm really interested in creating a career path for people who come here. You know, you actually want these places to be full of life. You want to have young people and old people together doing stuff, because actually there isn't much more important than growing stuff together.
Tim aims to make horticulture appealing, attractive and relevant. He wants to make it something young people want to do. But from the people employed here to the planting and hard landscaping, the entire project is being sensitively managed in the spirit of those who used to work in the garden. Some gardens that have undergone restoration can feel like museums petrified in time. But at the Lost Gardens of Heligan, you get exactly the opposite impression. Yeah, the gardens have been restored to their former glory, but rather than reaching a final resting place, you feel that what has been created is a springboard into the future.
If you are going on holiday in Cornwall this year, do visit Heligan, and there are lots of really good gardens in the area. So go to our website and you can get details for quite a few of them. Now, this bed grew potatoes. And if you're going to be away, you can guarantee that this will fill up with weeds quicker than you can apply sun cream. So it's a good idea to plant it up before you go away. And I'm putting into here a cabbage. It's a red drumhead cabbage that will make a lovely, round, plum maroon-coloured football of a cabbage. Delicious at Christmas time, cooked with juniper and vinegar and brown sugar. And that is, for us, in our family, is an absolute essential Christmas dish. And these will be ready to harvest from late November through till next March. So we're planning ahead. When you're planting cabbages, you've got to think about spacing. The closer together they are, the smaller the cabbage will be. And very simple, just pop it in and firm it in well. All of the cabbage family you should plant really firmly. And that's to stop root rot, because they're going to get heavy. And you want those roots to be in the ground and to act like guy ropes holding it. Otherwise, they flop all over the place. I know some people feel that you shouldn't water brassica in, but let the roots grow out looking for moisture. And that way they get deeper and the plant gets more established. However, if you're going to be away for a couple of weeks, you should water anything you plant really well, because it may not have any more water at all till you get back, and then it would suffer. And also, I will give them a bit of a feed, and that comes in the shape of garden compost. Now, these are planted and they will be fine up to a point. But as soon as I leave here, they will be attacked. Pigeons have become a big problem at Longmeadow, and I need to protect them from those. And at this time of year, cabbage white butterflies are the enemy of all brassica growers. So what we're trying to do is stop the butterfly laying its eggs. And the best way to do that is to put up a barrier. If you've got some old pots that you're not using and you pop them over the top, it's much easier to drape the netting over without it getting caught. Now, I'd say that this net is far too small for a cabbage white butterfly to squeeze through, but it is amazing what they will get through. So certainly no bigger than that. Once you've got the net on, just two things to consider. Make sure it's nice and taut so that smaller birds don't get tangled up in it. And also weigh down the sides or tuck them into the ground. You can use tent pegs, bricks, anything you've got. But if you leave a gap, you can guarantee that a cabbage white butterfly will get in. Now, what I'm looking for, at best, are small, perfectly formed little red cabbages about the size of melons. But some people like their veg to be as big as possible. And Joe has been to South Wales to meet a man who doesn't just want to grow the best, he wants to grow the biggest.
Dear Gardener's World, I grow a variety of vegetables and flowers, and it'd be a pleasure to welcome you to come along and see my allotment in the small Welsh village of Llanharry. Regards, Philip Vowles. Wow, look at this. This is a huge plot. We've got this flower border here. Edibles, of course. Strawberries along here. But where is he? Bill?
Hello, I'm in here, Joe.
Ah, you're in the polytunnel.
Yeah.
Struth, this really is a giant allotment packed full of giant veg. Phil, where are you?
Hello,
Ah,
Joe. Hello.
there you are.
Hello.
Nice to meet
How are
you.
Yeah, good. Nice to meet you.
Is this a cabbage?
That's a cabbage, yes. That's one of mine, my beauties.
That is just incredible. From metre-long carrots to world record-breaking cucumbers, Philip Vowles has been growing here in his giant allotment for the past 30 years.
I grow them to show, but the biggest I take to the local pub, and they'll cook them up for a Sunday lunch, and they'll feed, I don't know, 120, 140 people, I expect.
Should we have a little measure of them?
It's not about size, it's all about weight. I'm estimating 70, 80 pounds.
70, 80 pounds?
Yes.
14.5 feet
Yeah,
in circumference.
that's right.
Do you use a lot of chemicals on them?
No, they're organically grown.
They're organically grown?
Yeah. The only thing I do use is molasses, which is a sugar-based thing.
Ah, there's always a secret
Well,
in there.
you know,
You've just given it away, you know.
Well, I put it in a barrel of water, stirred it up, get a nice head on it, like a pint of beer, and then poured it over the cabbage.
Over the leaves?
Over
So
the
it's
leaves.
like a foliar feed?
Foliage feed, yeah.
It certainly works, doesn't it? What's under those blankets?
There's a few secrets under those blankets.
Look at that.
Wow.
Oh, that was even bigger.
They get a bit bigger as you come up the tunnel here.
That's like a crocodile skin, isn't it?
That's just 4 weeks growth there.
4 weeks. So it's grown about sort of a foot a week.
Foot a week, yeah. And I got one slightly bigger. This is the really big one. I'm very pleased with this one.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
That is an absolute stunner, isn't it?
That's 5 weeks growth.
5 weeks growth, of course it is. So how heavy do you think that might be?
Well, I'm estimating it's going around the £100 at the moment. The show is in 2 weeks' time, and I'm going to debate whether to cut it for the show or possibly go for a world record. I've been showing now 30 years, and I've never seen a longer marrow. So the potential, that could go grow in another 3 or 4 weeks, and I could be a world beater.
Now, why do you blanket them over?
Skins get so hard with direct sun on them, they grow so quick and they just burst open.
The energy's got nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go, that's right.
Are we covering them up?
Yeah, we better, yeah. The old sun is coming out, yeah.
Okay. You grow everything here, don't you, Phil? Everything.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. This is the cabbage I grew last year. I kept the actual stalk, potted it up. This spring now is shot a seed head up. Nice big yellow flowers. These are the pods. And if you just look inside,
Oh, yeah, there is.
you can see all the seed there. It's a 12-month process.
What variety did you start with?
They were Tex. They originated as a cow cabbage years ago.
So every year you've been doing this?
Yeah.
So, in fact, you're creating a whole new sort of cabbage here, a super-sized cabbage.
I'd like to think so. They've grown in size every year, you know, for the last 20 years.
This is actually the most important part of the allotment.
Exactly.
So where to next then, Phil?
Well, I got some small pumpkins I'd like to show you.
Yeah, small, right. There's nothing small on this allotment. Wow, look at that one.
Yeah.
Monty, eat your heart out.
It's quite a good one, isn't he?
Hey, he's going to have to do something to beat that, isn't he?
Oh, well, that's it. That's what it's all about.
Oh,
Got a bit out of hand.
bit out of hand. Oh,
There's one there.
one. Look at that. Beauty, isn't it?
Lovely colour to him. I think he's beginning to ripen up, but it's got a bit out of hand. I had to go on a family wedding. Had to go on a family wedding abroad, and I left it to go for a week, and it's just gone berserk. I got to get in there somewhere and start cutting back, cut all the side runners off. I just usually like to have 3 main runners.
Right, OK.
So that all the goodness is going into the one individual fruit.
Right, so, do you want a hand?
Yes, please.
What are your absolute top tips for growing giant veg?
Every day you've got to spend hours watering, cutting back, and patience. You've got to look at your plant, and the plant will tell you whether it wants water or feeding. We all meet in the pub occasionally, and there's a bit of bragging goes on. I got this big, and I got the biggest. And my answer is always, do your talking on the day.
Yeah.
It's not about winning.
I saw a
no.
competitive element of you there. My money is on that marrow.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's if I cut it, but I'm not 100% whether I'm going to cut it yet.
What's this space?
Right.
Well, obviously, the big question is, will Philip cut his marrow or not? Will he go for the world record? We can find out on August the 12th at the Vale of Glamorgan Agricultural Show, and you can go along. It's there, and you can get all the details from our website, and you can cheer Philip on. Now, talk about cheering on. I saw Joe's remark about my giant sunflower. Well, it's not too bad. That's what, 7.5? 8 foot tall, but the season is yet young. So really the only debate, it seems to me, is do I enter the giant sunflower contest or do I hang back and go for the world record? I planted these yews to make a hedge to replace what had been a box hedge hit by blight last spring. People have this idea that yew is very slow growing. That is not true. It can put on at least 12 inches of growth every year. And the secret to it is to have plenty of water but good drainage. And this has been planted on a slight mound with lots of grit underneath it, so that even if it's very wet here, and it can be in winter absolutely sodden, it won't sit in a puddle. However, if I want it to be a tightly clipped hedge, I need to stop this very lax growth and start to clip it to encourage the side shoots that will grow into one solid green barrier. There are 2 things I have to consider. The first is the height, because each of these plants has a leader, and really you don't want to cut that leader until it reaches the final height that you want it. And I have a feeling I might quite like a yew hedge to be about 6 foot tall to close off the jewel garden. So for the moment, I'm going to leave it. But what I can cut now are all these side shoots. Just giving it a light trim will have 2 really good effects. The first is we've got a slight batter on it, so the top is narrower than the bottom. So the bottom will get more sunlight and therefore grow more strongly and keep nice and thick and bushy. And the second is that at every cut point, you're stimulating side shoots to grow, so that is making the hedge grow thicker, even though it's very young, and may grow twice as tall. Now, August into October is the very best time to cut yew. That way it will stay absolutely crisp right through till next May, whereas if you cut it earlier, you have to cut it twice. Now, it's certainly hedge cutting season, but you needn't just be clipped in neat hedges. It's brilliant for topiary, and you can train it and clip it to almost any shape. And to satisfy Nigel's enormous ego, there is a statue slowly growing of his dogginess. Right, Nige? I need you to pose for me. Come on, you're a good poser. Come on. Come on. The Nigel topiary has been slowly growing. It's got a long way to go yet, but if you want to make a topiary animal, it's a perfectly good way to start. I had 2 plants left over from the hedging, so I popped them in here, put a very crude frame up, and gradually have been shaping it. This is his back. That's going to be his head, his forelegs, his chest, his back legs there, and then his tail. So what we need to do is clip along the back, because we don't need that. So just tie that in a little bit. This is just to hold the shape until we get enough stems in there. Now, we cut your nose off there, Nige. Oh dear. Disappointed? Everybody hates their own photograph, Nigel. OK, perhaps it needs a little bit more work. Just a touch or 2 more, but give it time. And the serious point is, if I clip it hard, I'm going to encourage nice bushy growth from which you can shape it. But if you leave it too much, you've got much less material to work with. OK, even if you're not planning on making some topiary, here's some jobs you can be doing this weekend. It's a good idea to cut the grass before going on holiday, but don't be tempted to cut it extra short. If it's very wet, then it's going to grow anyway, but if it's very dry, cutting it short will do damage. So just mow it at its normal length. Whilst you're away, your veg plot or allotment will be producing food like mad, and it seems a shame to waste it. So if you've got time, harvest as much as you can and process it to store, and if not, give it away so somebody else can enjoy it and it doesn't go to waste. At this time of year, when everything is full grown and in full leaf, a storm can cause havoc, not just breaking the largest plants, but damaging all those around them too. So it's worth going through the borders, just checking that everything is properly secured and staked, so that it will stay firm in your absence, whatever the weather. The key thing, if you're going away, is if you can get the garden shipshape before you leave, you'll be calmer whilst you're away, and when you come back, it won't be such a job to get back in control. And if you're not going away, well, just enjoy the next week as much as you can in the garden. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here next Friday, so I'll see you then. Do you want that biscuit now? Go on then. Bye-bye.